And welcome back to the Legacy Premier League. We're back for match 4 with Jonathan Sukenik. And why don't we head over to the bracket so we can talk about who's going to be playing this match?
Yeah,
We're
oh,
Go ahead.
sorry. So it looks like we got the Pleasant Kenobi against Caleb Durward, two Brewsters with some brews in here. Michael Bonde, you can see that he already is the group winner in the winners bracket, so he gets to go to sleep. It's really late, but for these two, they still got a jam. They still got a battle for their spot. They want to pick up the other winner bracket spot, so they're gonna have to rattle off two in a row here if they're gonna be able to do it.
Right. The loser of this match is going to be relegated to the losers bracket. They're going to be fighting for their life starting in the elimination rounds. But for now, they're just hoping to rattle off a couple wins. Let's head over to the decks and talk about that. We have two uh I guess you could call them tier decks. We have Caleb Durward. He's playing what do you want to call this? Like it's
Mono blue awesomeness. Like this is
yeah.
just so many cool things going on. So Caleb tends to like these chalice decks. So this is a mono blue chalice deck. He also played Bomberman another season really helped popularize that deck. But here it's kind of like a prison combo mana deck. Like it does a lot of different things. So uh, besides being a chalice deck, it has the Lion's Eye Diamond Echo of Eons combo to be able to refuel the hand. Narset to not only help find those combo pieces, but be able to abuse the Echo. And Urza, which I'm sure a lot of people, Urza and Karn, a lot of people know from Modern, so it plays here.
Yeah, it's really similar to the Bomberman deck in a sense where it has a lot of fast mana and it has some powerful 4 mana payoffs. This deck in particular has some more 3 mana payoffs with the Sign, the Narset that kind of occupies that mentor slot, but
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like another take at Incantomb Chalice deck with a little bit of difference.
Yeah, and it'll be really interesting if he can chalice to really weird numbers, preventing Pleasant Kenobi from assembling the food chain combo. So like 3 and 4 are numbers that could be very interesting. 4 also locks out Venser, but then would allow Eternal Scourge. So we'll see how
Right.
the
Let's
Chalice of the Void plays out.
Pleasant Kenobi's deck. As you alluded to, he's playing Food Chain, which is the Food Chain Mist Hollow-Griffin
Yeah.
deck. Go
Mhm.
ahead.
Yeah, definitely a lot of cool cards that you don't see every day in Legacy, especially Hydroid Crisis, Eternal Scourge and Miss Hollow Griffin. Definitely don't see any other playing any other list, but at its core, it does want to be trying to combo out Caleb before Caleb is able to lock him out or make him only draw one card while Caleb draws seven.
Yeah, something we're gonna see that's kind of similar to the last match that we just watched is the fact that in terms of legacy decks, this is one of the ones that is less weak to the card Chalice of the Void in
Mhm.
comparison to a lot of the cantrip heavy decks or a lot of the combo decks that are heavy on 1 mana spells. This deck has brainstorms and some mana dorks and source of plowshares, but besides that, a lot of its core game plan pieces are cost more than that. So an early Chalice of the Void is going to be much less devastating than it would be for a different deck.
Yeah, it really depends on play draw for how the Chalice of the Void on one plays out, but Chalice of the Void on other numbers could be very interesting. Now that I see the deck list, I see that 3 also locks out Recruiter of the Guard, so 3 or 4 could be potentially good numbers. But would require a lot of mana, but it's nothing that Urza Lord High Artificer hasn't done before.
Right, not unreasonable at all. Something else that's worth noting in terms of a dynamic that's going to possibly pop up in this matchup is that the Urza deck, and which is also a Karn deck, one of the avenues it has to beat certain decks in the Legacy format is being able to Karn for bridge,
Mhm.
which is something that this Food Chain deck isn't really all too concerned about because it doesn't have to win the game through the combat phase.
Yep, it wins with Walking Ballista. It still has interaction with Knight of Autumn if it wants to be able to attack. So yeah, it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. But on paper, if you were to give percentages, who do you think's ahead?
I'm I'm gonna give it to the food chain deck. I think between the fact that it doesn't have to win through combat, it's not as weak to Chalice of the Void, and it has a lot of relevant interaction points. It has Force of Will, it has Knight of Autumn, like you alluded to,
Mhm.
and even the Teferi Time Raveler could be fairly annoying. So I'm gonna give it to Kenobi.
Okay, I'm actually going to take the other side here. I feel like there's some really unfair things that Caleb's able to do, and if he's able to accomplish any of them, it would be very hard for Pleasant Kenobi to win. So we'll see how it plays out. But there's there's definitely a lot of play. The Crocus thing is pretty interesting. We saw it a little bit earlier in the match between Pleasant Kenobi and Bryant, I think it was. Yeah, so pretty much like Caracas being able to bounce like Psy was like pretty interesting.
Yeah, the value Caracas, if you would. Um, so sometimes that land is a dedicated hate card for the Mirror decks or the Emrakul decks, but in this matchup we could see it just making both Urza and Psy Master Thopterus like slightly more annoying to deploy. Obviously, bouncing Urza and giving them the opportunity to make some more constructs isn't necessarily the best thing you can do in every game, but it's an option that's open to you for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. So it looks like we're ready for the match. So let's get down to it.
Perfect.
And we see a pretty interesting starting scenario where,
Oh wow.
yeah, I'd like to take back my prediction.
You're locked in. You're locked in. I got the Kenobi side of this. It looks like Caleb has multi-4 this game, but as far as 4 card hands go, this is certainly not the worst one.
Yeah,
On the upper ends.
yeah, he might just be able to play turn two Urza, and Mox Opal would be the best draw for the turn two Opal because then he wouldn't lose the City of Traders. And
Right.
Pleasant Kenobi's hand is a little bit slow, but he does have Force of Will, and Force of Will doesn't feel as costly when your opponent is already down so many resources. So
Right.
it's gonna be
It's gonna be
interesting.
interesting to see if Kenobi decides to fight over this Chalice of the Void. Like you said, Caleb's already on such low resources, so even though the Chalice isn't immediately effective against a Kenobi, it could be effective down the line, and he could possibly think that with him being on such low resources, it could be worth it. But you see him taking a much more patient line and just letting it resolve, which I think is a very heads up play.
Yeah, like it would be a little different if he was, say, like a Delver deck, but being a deck that doesn't rely as much on one drops and an opening hand that contains no one drops, the chalice doesn't matter as much. And it turns out Caleb does draw the Mox Opal I was talking about, but Pleasant
So
Kenobi being paid off for holding onto that Force of Will.
yeah, you're getting pretty good at predicting these draws off the top. First the Mox Diamond and now this Mox Opal, but this Force of Will is going to be a pretty devastating thing for Caleb to see. Now he needs to draw both more mana and another payoff in order to press his advantage here. But
Yeah,
luckily for him, it's not like President Kenobi's doing all that much. He's going to be casting a trained Armadon next turn possibly.
yeah, I do like to keep it on the DL how good I am at predicting the future, or else people come after me. But yeah, so the Trainman Armadon into Phantom Monster it was, right? 4 mana, three
Phantom
three
Monster,
blind.
yeah,
Yeah. So some good old fashioned magic beatdown should be good enough, and that is an advantage to playing a deck like Food Chain or Elves or these creature based combo decks that you don't have to combo to win. You can just win by doing your normal fair plan in games like this. Whereas certain other like combo decks that are more risky and a high volatility might just not be able to win from this board state, giving the opponent enough time. So like take Red Prison where you kept a turn one Blood Moon hand with no other threat. Like you're just playing a probability game at that point, and you're just hoping you draw your Rabble Master or Chandra. But here yeah, playing Knight of Autumn's good, but like just any creature, like let's just start attacking. Let's get this game over with.
totally. And honestly, it might even be disingenuous to call this food chain deck a combo deck where although it does have this combo finish, it can make infinite mana, it can cast a walking ballista or an arbitrarily large target crisis. Um in its essence, it's like you said, it is a creature deck. It can play a grindy game or a beatdown game, and honestly, it usually ends up doing that more often, I would assume.
So, what draws would you give Caleb to make this game more interesting, like right now? So, if you could plan the next two draw steps.
Uh, Well, he needs to slow down the game a pretty considerable amount. He's going to be taking 5 damage here and possibly at least 8 on the following turn. So I think that Caleb needs to draw something that's going to draw the game, buy him a bunch of turns. And the card that pops into my head for that would be a Karn the Great Creator, fetching an ensnaring bridge.
I think
Um,
Urza might also be decent.
would be decent because it would lock up the ground, right? The 1/4 would check the 3/3, the token would check the 2/1, so it would significantly slow down the clock. So that could possibly work too. Something that's worth noting, although I did say that ensnaring bridge is not too much of a concern for this banned food chain deck since it can't win outside of combat. In the games where it's trying to win inside of combat, it doesn't actually have many ways to take the ensnaring bridge off the table. I think it's just the one Knight of Autumn, since he is playing the banned colors. Often you'll
Yeah.
see food chain playing Sultai actually, and will have access to Abrupt Decay, but to play white cards instead this weekend or this day of the week.
Luckily, Caleb remembered his chalice triggers there, so no bother.
Powerful wizard.
Yeah.
I didn't expect anything less, honestly.
Yeah.
Well, Asai is actually a decent draw here because he did draw artifacts on the 2 previous turns.
Yeah, and Caleb's being pretty mature there, understanding that he really needs the blockers. So he could have played Mox Opal first and saved his City of Traders, but really just identifying that he needs to live, and the Thopter matters way more than the land because the land doesn't do anything if you're at 0 life. So having the Thopter is better.
Totally, and he could even consider starting to sacrifice these chalices to try to unmulligan in a sense, and try to just get some chump blocks in and dig to some more powerful cards.
Yeah, but we can't see it because it's exiled. But the Manipulate Fate surely exiled some Mist Hologryphon, so a bunch of Phantom monsters is going to be pretty hard to race. Like this isn't like the modern Paradoxical Outcome deck where you're going to expect Caleb to make multiple 1/1s and 1. Really, each artifact would just make the 1/1/1 and then be done. So Phantom Monster Beatdown is able to win game 1.
Caleb going out the noble way with the Ancient Tomb.
Yeah, it saves a lot of time. It's better than right click concede.
Right.
All right, so let's look at sideboarding. So the BAMP food chain deck. Let's see. I guess like Vendilion Click could be a consideration because it like pressures planeswalkers and interacts, but it could be a little bit slow as well. EE, I guess it could be nice for like even E on 0 might do something, and you have a Trinket Mage to look for it. So being able to clean up a bunch of the 0 drops and Thopters and constructs if you end up on the beatdown plan. And the Force of Negation seems like it could be good against a deck that is playing a bunch of Planeswalker. Like it pretty much stops everything except for Psy and Urza. So I could see some interest in the Force of Negation. But it looks like Deputy's huge game. Second Knight of Autumn's good. So it'll be interesting to see how Pleasant Kenobi slants his deck in this matchup. But he's still going to have the combo in there. He's still hoping to combo out. But as we saw in the first game, sometimes the beatdown plan is good enough. And it is interesting how many Swords of Plowshares he keeps in because it depends on if Caleb is going to keep on chalicing on 1 because the 1-drop would scale accordingly with that. But being able to hit like tag an Urza or Psy could also be lights out.
Yeah, I think it's fine for him to keep in a couple copies of Swords to Plowshares, just because Caleb's gonna probably try to rely slightly less on Chalice of the Void, seeing how that first game played out, and also Kenobi just has more answers to it after board, so getting it off the table is a lot easier. But you can see him shaving down on some of his redundant combo pieces, perhaps assuming that Caleb's going to be able to interact on that axis pretty effectively and wants to rely less on it or draw less redundant copies of certain cards.
Mm-hmm. What do you think from Caleb's side?
Caleb doesn't look like he has much going on for this matchup. A lot of one of the big problems with these Karn the Great Creator decks is that a lot of the sideboard is dedicated to the Karn package, and you can see that the rest of his sideboard is featuring cards such as Defense Grid and Thorn, definitely things that are more for the more spell based combo decks and not this creature based combo deck like Food Chain. So it looks like he's doesn't have all too much going on. To this matchup that we haven't touched upon yet is the Narset Echo of Aeons aspect, and Narset is a card that if Caleb can protect will be difficult because are easily chump blocked or they so if
Mm-hmm.
Caleb can
Yeah, it's it'll be interesting to see how this post game plays out. Like, it doesn't feel like either of them are improving a lot, but they're still gearing their deck for attacking the plan that the opponent. And it is interesting that like the Karn wish board, like when do you bring in some of the singletons or not? So we see defense grid in this opening hand, and it could be possible that you want defense grid in your hand instead of it's not really something you would Karn tutor because that means you already resolved a Karn. So it proves like it Charles with a force of will or as much here, but
Yeah, Jonathan Kenobi just
yeah,
slower hand, more creature-based hand, no counter magic in sight, which is kind of realistic just because he only has access to the 5 copies of Force Will. He doesn't have any soft permission or any discard spells, so he can't really realistically action, especially considering the fact that Caleb's deck. If you just end up mulliganing to interaction, and Caleb has a hand that has 2 threats, you're gonna get blown out.
mm-hmm. And so Caleb chose instead of getting a chip shot for two damage and getting the LED sets up for some really good lines where you can make a lot of mana, Karn minus, and then play something else. So
I mean, this game
I
is
think this could just be
yeah, the LED because he needed no mana source.
yeah.
That's great. I believe that he can just opponent here. Just
Yeah, he gets to have it all here for style points though, right? He still has access to 6 mana right now.
oh, of course. I respect a good style point. You gotta get your value thopters in. You can't miss the small things. You gotta play as tight as possible from as far ahead as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's so the defense grid boarding in is like subtle and didn't matter in this particular game, but defense grid is kind of like a I guess you could call it like a spell of will. So we see the main deck defense grid, and we see boarding in his second defense grid in this matchup with deterministic kill, like Pleasant Kenobi would have with this.
I said earlier, the pieces of interaction is just so devastating because it requires him to draw 2 of his 5 relevant cards instead of only 1.
Yeah, definitely.
Unable to break through this, I don't believe. So I think we're gonna be pretty quickly here. I think we're just having a couple. Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, it is true that Pleasant Kenobi could have played the Iceman Coatl on his main phase, but given like even if he did that, the side making enough Thopters to be able to protect a Karn would have been enough. So the game would have played out the same way.
Yeah, perhaps Caleb letting Kenobi know that even if he had played correctly, he still would have had him covered. Just being
Yes,
the nice gentleman that he is.
right. Sometimes it's about closure. So for the third game, we're gonna have Pleasant Kenobi on the play with the food chain deck. How do you like his percentages there? Being a deck that can kind of like turn 2 combo in some spots, I guess.
Turn 2 is definitely possible. Fairly unlikely, I believe. Although actually, it might just not be possible. But even beyond that, though, he's gonna have more relevant points of interaction. He's gonna have time to cast his Codals, to at least cycle a little bit before Caleb can present some game-ending threats. I think it's possible that and obviously I am not a seasoned veteran in the food chain versus Urza Echo matchup, but it's possible that Kenobi is supposed to perhaps mulligan slightly more aggressively, like his hand in that second game, um, mulligan to force a will on its own, but maybe mulligan to a higher goldfish hand.
All right, so we
All right, so we see Kenobi here with a faster goldfish, like I was saying. He's got his turn one noble hierarchy, and even as a force of will, so he gets to decide on what axis he wants to fight over. And I like this a lot. He decided to let the defense grid resolve, and he's gonna have access to 3 mana next turn, which is
mm.
actually gonna almost completely invalidate this defense grid. It's gonna require him to play a little bit slower. He obviously can't develop his threats on his main phase, but it at least means that this defense grid isn't a full duress.
Do you ever get that feeling of deja vu?
Like
Yeah,
Caleb's hand looking exactly the same as the previous one.
yeah, definitely. But yeah, the force of will in 3 mana is definitely going to be important. So it'll be interesting to see how Pleasant Kenobi paces this game. So once again, boarding that defense grid is very, very important here. So I actually wouldn't fault Pleasant Kenobi for taking a more aggressive line and just playing Eternal Scourge, if he gets the turn back. But it's kind of it's a tough spot, right? Because similar to other games we've seen today, you can make your opponent have it and you like develop your board. But the thing is, Food Chain, even though game one was won by playing a 3 mana 3/3, that's not really what it's trying to accomplish. So it'll be interesting to see how this game ends up pacing out. We could be in for a really long game, or it could just be turn two Karn, and then we're on to the next match. So we'll see how it
Yeah,
goes.
from Kenobi's perspective, it's possible that with the Eternal Scourge and a couple copies of Noble Hierarch that he's not too afraid of the card Karn. So then the question becomes how afraid of his is he of a card like Urza,
Mhm.
where would be like slightly more difficult to deal with since he doesn't have a direct answer. And it looks like he's opting to not play his Eternal Scourge, which I think I like a lot, especially with the top deck Noble Hierarch, because he can play this turn a little slower, and then next turn he can play Noble Hierarch, and then on the following turn he's gonna have access to 6 mana if he
Yep.
wants to.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, One thing that we did see, or rather we didn't see happen, was Caleb had the option to play a turn one Karn if he wanted to.
Mhm.
After playing the defense grid, he could have gone pedal, Mox Opal, float a mana, Mox Opal, and then cast Karn. His resources. Do you think that that's something? I'm sure that's something that he considered. We saw him pause a little bit
Yeah.
on his main phase.
Yeah, the tank was definitely about that, but you're costing yourself 2 Lotus Petals and one of the Mox Opals to be able to do that. And the scenario where you're not going to be playing Karn is specifically this, where Pleasant Kenobi's choosing to just pass, where you're kind of just time walking him. So you not only get to save Petal Mox Opal, like pretty much a whole Black Lotus worth of temporary mana, but you also force Pleasant Kenobi to need to play in a way such that either you're giving him a chance to make the wrong decision, or I guess it's in quotes, like you're giving him a decision point where he could just be shields down on force of will, and you have access to more resources. That way, you could really punish him on turn two. So I do really like Caleb's line.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you. And something else to consider is the fact that Karn in itself, like the cards you tutor off Karn are also fairly mana intensive. He could minus and get a line side diamond first, and then tutor something more mana intensive on the following turn. But if he
Mhm.
does that, then the Karn gets chipped for 1 point by the Noble Hierarch, and then tutoring something else is gonna kill the Karn. So it wouldn't be that effective of a play.
Yeah, it's a good observation about like how the turn cycles would have played out from there. It is interesting. So this Karn play was kind of interesting to me. So do you feel like that's a function of Narset having resolved, so he knows that on average when he minuses he'll get another decent payoff, so like another Karn or another Narset, so he's just trying to utilize his mana?
Yeah, he both utilizes mana, and I'm sure he also believes that there's a non-zero chance that uh Kenobi was just maintaining appearances and keeping up the noble hierarch instead of getting in 1 points of damage, but not actually having the copy of Force of Will in his hand. I think a lot of players in Kenobi's spot would have been very tempted to counter the Narset,
Mhm.
and the fact that it didn't get countered perhaps made Caleb think that there's a good chance that he doesn't have it.
Yeah, super tight play from both people, and the second noble hierarch doing a lot of work, preventing Narset from drawing into another card. Caleb actually had enough mana to just hard cast Echo of Eons, so really good attack, and it looks like Train Armadon beat down might, and then Phantom Monster, just a replay of the first game, except Caleb had a lot more cards. Might be what we're in
Right, there
for.
was some back and forth.
Mhm.
Definitely a great play by Kenobi. He opted he had access to 4 mana on his turn, but only opted to use one of them just to get that extra loyalty off of the Narsa, which I think was super important. It
Yeah.
just prevented that extra minus and that extra opportunity for Caleb to snowball the game.
Yeah, we're kind of in a spot where like Pleasant Kenobi knows he's ahead, so he wants to reduce as much variance as possible a part of the game. Like it could be possible Narset whiffs and doesn't hit anything that interesting, but why would you introduce that sort of variance into a game where on average you're winning?
And these ancient tombs are being kind of relevant here. They got tapped a couple times, did
Mhm.
some damage to Caleb, and now he's taking a 5 spot off this Mist Hollow Griffin, and he doesn't have many taps left in the chamber. He's the amount of time that Caleb has to draw another payoff is reducing fairly quickly.
Yeah. If only Pleasant Kenobi played a Darksteel Citadel in his deck, then he would be able to Trinket Mage and Eternal Scourge to present lethal next turn. But it could be possible that just this Griffin by itself could be enough.
Yeah, I
So,
mean it's at worst pseudo lethal, right?
mhm.
Just attacking for 5 and essentially destroying both copies of Ancient Tomb is usually good enough
Yeah.
in these kinds of spots. So I would presume that Caleb only has 1 turn left, where his best draw would be something along the lines of an ensnaring bridge.
Yeah, it's tough because this Chromox is actually turned off. There's nothing to imprint on it, so he's 1 mana short of being able to Karn Bridge, and Bridge doesn't work against Noble Hierarch that well.
Oh, that is also true. Yeah, a lot of avenues from Kenobi's deck. He can also recruit for so I'm not sure that Caleb has many ways to break through this.
I don't think Island is one of them either, but he does get 1 more turn, but without Ancient Tomb, so it's looking a little bit grim for Caleb, but we'll see if the top deck could be kind to him with something I'm not aware of. So from
Uh,
Kenobi's spot, though, we need to think about how to shut off all the possible outs. So what do you name with this needle?
well, I probably wouldn't cast it into the Chalice of the Void, but
Oh yeah, that's true. So probably nothing. Great. So what's this recruiter looking for then?
I mean, you're certainly naming nothing. I'm not sure if you're.
Oh,
Oh,
nice. Yeah, he was on my line. Great.
yeah.
uh, yes. So what is this
Probably would have.
recruiter looking?
I probably would have recruited for a Knight of Autumn, just because
Mm.
it covers most of the things that could possibly beat you in that spot. But I think he was just holding on to it because it gives him the option to get the walking ballista as well, if that's something that he wants access to.
Yeah, makes sense. And just like that, we see Pleasant Kenobi take down the match. So, uh, not the best for Caleb, but uh, the food chain deck, not doing food chain's primary goal, but definitely doing something it's capable of just by playing a huge pile of creatures and Force of Will. So it
Yeah, and
appeals to the Delver side of me.
yeah, I guess some good old fashioned beatdowns.
Yeah.
It had just enough interaction we saw there. Caleb's deck not being able to interact back on a meaningful fashion, and just the fact that a lot of the cards that the Urza deck was looking to deploy in order to annoy the opponent, just not really having text in this matchup, really came back to bite him, I think.
Yeah, it was cool, game 2 being able to see Caleb's deck do his thing though, and, the turn 1 defense grid, turn 2 Karn, and it's interesting, like, game 1 wasn't so much of a game due to the Moldifor, then game 2, Caleb got to do his thing, and the coolest part is in game 3, Caleb had pretty much the same hand, but then this time Pleasant Kenobi was able to defeat it, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah, the Noble Hierarch being huge there in order to play through that defense grid for sure.
Yep. So, let's take a look at the bracket.
So with this loss, Caleb has been relegated to the losers bracket, so he's going to be playing elimination matches when we get to that stage of the tournament. But Pleasant Kenobi is still staying in this group stage and gets to play against Bryant Cook for a spot into the winners bracket.
Yeah, and that match I'm definitely looking forward to. So, Bryant being a like this humans deck, you have some creature on creature beatdown, but the humans aspect of it still needs to respect the food chain combo, and the food chain combo can go over the top of the humans deck even on a board state where it's behind. So there's going to be a lot of cool interaction going on here.
Yeah, we're gonna have some large creatures on the ground from the human side, some smaller creatures but in the air from the food chain side. Food chain's gonna have access to some sorts of plowshares and such to deal with the humans, but the humans are gonna have stuff like meddling mage to slow down the combo. So I think it's gonna be a very interesting match actually.
Yeah, definitely. So it looks like that's going to be it for Edgar and me today. It was definitely great commentating with you. I really appreciated it.
Great time, buddy.
Yeah, and so we're going to be going to a raffle because everyone loves raffles. So here's Julian with a raffle.
Hey guys, can you hear me?